Joining me from Beirut, our correspondent Layla Molana-Allen. Layla, first the president spoke, calling for dialogue, and now the Prime Minister. What can we expect?
Yes, so Prime Minister Saad Hariri is due to speak at 4 o'clock today, all morning, and really for the last few days there have been rumours circulating that he is going to step down. He did say just 2 days ago that if there was one more drop of Lebanese blood spilt in these clashes, then he would step down, and we have seen huge violence here today, a real escalation. So it's unclear as yet whether he is actually going to resign or whether he is just going to use that as a negotiating tactic, saying that he will step down if people don't step back and stop this violence. Now, what's unclear after that is whether the government can continue to function. There are several options. Either the government continues to function without him, but that is unlikely because he is the main Sunni leader, and under the current constitution, which of course has not yet been changed, the Prime Minister must be a Sunni. He is the only Sunni leader with the power, with the votes to do that, unless he can find an immediate replacement. The other alternative is that perhaps he's trying to resign in order to rebuild his own smaller cabinet and bring in some technocrats to meet some of the demands of the protesters here. He had been trying to convince some other cabinet members to resign to try and appease the protesters, but at the moment one of the sticking points is Gibran Bassi, the foreign minister. He is the most unpopular politician in this country, probably with Hariri second, and the problem is that he is the president's son-in-law, and the president at the moment, President Aoun, is determined that in any future cabinet Gibran Bassi will be in it, so he's a sticking point.
Layla, what's it like on the streets in Beirut right now? I understand a protest camp has been destroyed.
Yes, there has been a real escalation today. So far in Beirut, the protests have been mostly peaceful with just a few small clashes. The ring road, which you can see just behind me, this arterial highway through the center of Beirut, has now been held by protesters for nearly 48 hours since the army backed off and decided not to try and get involved with pushing them back anymore because they didn't want any more clashes. And from early this morning, groups of Hezbollah and Amal supporters turned up on bikes and started trying to start fights, pushing them back. The army tried to step in, as did security forces, riot police in separate areas, but it was chaos. These supporters were attacking protesters, they were ripping things apart, they were attacking media as well, and security forces saying, we are outnumbered, we need help, we need reinforcements. That went on for several hours, and then they started moving down this road just next to me towards downtown Beirut, which has been the site of most of the peaceful protests the last few days. And what happened was they started ripping up the protest camp. Lines of women started forming, trying to stop them from getting into Riyadh al-Salah Square, which is just next to Parliament. They aggressively went in, they had batons, and we started seeing armed riot police and army with riot shields running into the square, people cheering as they arrived, trying to stop them. They eventually had to disperse those supporters with tear gas. I apologise if I'm a little bit sniffy because I caught some of that on the wind, but luckily I was slightly outside the square at that point. But many people who weren't being officially targeted actually got caught up in those tear gas firings as well. They have now managed to clear the square. Huge army presence, huge riot police presence. Most of the protesters have been pushed back behind me onto the ring road and are waiting to see what happens. And there is a report that there has been one person seriously injured. We're not sure yet if a gun was fired, but at least 3 ambulances have been rushing into the square. So quite chaotic here today, and a lot more violence than we've seen so far.
All right, Layla, well, do take care. Thank you very much indeed for that update from Beirut. Layla Molana-Allen, and we'll of course be hearing more from Layla later on after Saad Hariri's speech.